Welcome back to KVNU's For the People. We talked about this a lot on the show, recent poll, including some time with new Cache County chair of the Cache County Republican Party. We talked about polling that has shown us. We talked about even some legislative concerns along these lines. What it basically comes down to is that the Republican Party may have a growing young voter issue on certain issues, at least. Recent polling has shown that when it comes to those, say, 30 and under, some of their top priorities have not, at least historically, in current history or recent history, been top priorities of the party itself. But young conservatives are aiming to change that, to bring their priorities to the forefront of the party. One of those priorities, of course, is polling showing that those under the age of 30 have a heightened interest in tackling the climate crisis than older Republican voters do. And in that sense, something locally that's happening that's actually proving the point on that. We've talked about this on the show as well, but it's known as the Prove It Act. It was introduced last week. A very short version of what this bill does is it is a climate change bill. It is a bill meant to address the climate crisis. But what it does is, in a very unique way, works as a tool to both promote American manufacturing, but at the same time give a boost to cleaner practices in that manufacturing and put some teeth in some of the existing rules and create additional rules that would help go after global emissions in general, specifically those coming from China. A recent report showed that nearly 90% of global emissions are actually coming outside of the U.S. So we have a lot of work to do ourselves, but the rest of the world, many areas at least, are further behind than we are. So this is a really interesting approach, and it is basically a conservative climate change bill. Expect to see more of these things, by the way, as Congress becomes younger. So we have an opportunity now to actually talk about this, not only with some folks who know much more about the bill than I do, but also some folks who happen to be in this age bracket. Joining us right now, frequent guest here on the show, our good friend Ryan Smith, and also alongside Ryan, Andrew Sandstrom, who is the Regional Director of Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends. And Andrew and Ryan both appreciate taking some time for us today. Who wants to start doing their best to kind of do a better job than I did of explaining what the Prove It Act is all about?
Well, thanks, Jason, for having us on, and I'll go ahead and start, and then Ryan will probably do it better than I did. I think you did a great job explaining what the bill does, which is essentially it collects data on pollution overseas in places like China and how that pollution compares to industries in the United States. So we already know that the United States tends to do things a lot cleaner and a lot more efficient than manufacturing overseas. And essentially this bill kicks off the data collection process so that we can start holding China and other countries accountable for pollution, because we have a lot of regulations and environmental standards, or even things that companies are just doing to be good citizens to have less pollution. And China tends to come in and undercut the American worker and the American manufacturer by sort of taking environmental shortcuts and cheating that process. So this kicks off the process of holding China and other countries accountable and leveling the playing field for American companies.
This is, and to that point, Andrew, what is so unique about this is that, I mean, just to call it a conservative approach to climate change solution is obviously accurate, but it's almost an undersell, because this is actually a very creative bill as well. And one part, you'd sent me some notes on this, but one suggestion or provision of the Prove It Act, and something that I know has been suggested in multiple different ways by Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends and other similar groups, is this idea of something like a polluter polluter import fee, and the idea behind that being not only are you penalizing the countries that are not doing more to take seriously curbing their emissions, but you're also, by penalizing them, encouraging growth in American manufacturing, which is something that one of the last few bipartisan goals the country has right now, right?
Yes, and sometimes people say bipartisan and they mean a bunch of Democrats and 2 Republicans, and that's definitely not the case. You're right to say this is a conservative-led effort, and conservative with a capital C. This isn't a this isn't a conservative. This isn't a this is like you said, a really creative idea, right? This isn't just business as usual. This is moving things along.
Sure.
But yes, this is. This gets us closer to where we could have a polluter import fee and grow manufacturing in the United States.
This is for listeners. If you'd like to read more as well, these guys, Andrew and Ryan, nice enough to send along a Washington Examiner op-ed recently written by Grayson Massey, the Western Region Director for Young Republicans. And it does a great job of spelling out the Prove It Act, but also talking about why this is, why you would put the label of a conservative solution on this. And Andrew, Ryan, for both of you, I know as conservative gentlemen yourself, that's important, right? You're wanting to do something about climate change, to change the direction things are headed when it comes to climate change, but you believe it can be done in a way that doesn't require much of what's suggested by, well, let's be honest, the people we usually hear from on addressing climate change, progressives, right?
Yeah. I think you saw like 5 or 6 years ago, young conservatives, college-aged conservatives and Republicans come out and say, it's time for us to push towards some type of action. And it's something that we care about. Andrew cares about, I care about the environment. Andrew cares about environment. And the fact is, I think, Republicans, we care about the world. We want to reduce emissions. We're the ones. A lot of us go out and hunt. A lot of us go out and fish. By heart, we're conservationists, and so it was time to have new ideas brought forth and not just allow. A lot of times, like you said, Jason, it's the left who's kind of the main group talking about the climate solutions. And there's a way and a different approach to say, I do care about the environment, but we're going to do it in a different way. We don't want those, what we would deem maybe more extreme ideas of, Green New Deal or things like that. But we do care about reducing pollutions. And I think that this act is a great step towards that. And it's really exciting for us young conservatives to be a part of this conversation, to feel like a few years ago we're talking about this, we're saying, hey, it's time for us to do some things, and then to see it starting to come to that fruition. That's an exciting thing for us as young conservatives to be able to feel like we're being a part of this conversation, we're being heard, and that our congressmen and senators are listening to the concerns of especially younger conservatives, and so that's been really neat.
This is and Ryan, of course, you're coming from a unique perspective For listeners, again, our guests here, Andrew Sandstrom, Regional Director of Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends, and Ryan Smith, President of the USU College Republicans. And Ryan, you're there as a college student yourself, as someone. Yep. You're talking with people in the very age group that we're kind of referencing here, the next generation of voters within the Republican Party, the base of the Republican Party in just a few years. What are you hearing when it comes to issues like climate change? When I talk to my conservative friends, they're frustrated that the left has owned this one so far, right? Is that a fair way to say it?
I think that's a fair way to say how it has been, but that's changing. And Jason, I'm no longer the president for USU. I'm now the chair for the state of Utah, and I think that, like you said, that puts me in a really unique position, especially now talking with people from UVU and BYU and U of U and having these connections with conservatives around the state. And the messaging is clear. I still think, young people, we are conservative. I'm a conservative Republican, but we're saying we need to be a part of the conversation because it's hard. Sometimes we want to be the party. Sometimes we say no to things, and we have to come up with our own solutions. And then to the issues that are going on, that this issue of our environment, and instead of allowing the left to kind of run away, so to speak, with all the messaging and basically say that conservatives and Republicans don't care about the environment, well, that's just not true. We just don't want your policies. We just want things done differently. It doesn't mean different doesn't always mean that we don't care. And so I think you're right that that's the feeling that we've had, but I really feel like, and I think Andrew can attest to that, I mean, just the short last 4 or 5 years, we're starting to see the messaging change. And it's interesting as, I talk with conservatives or even people who are on the left, and they're always kind of a little bit surprised that we've got so many conservatives that are, especially I'll say people on the left, they're a little bit surprised sometimes about that. Oh, you do care, because I think they have this messaging and thought process that conservatives don't care, which I just don't think is true. We just want something done differently.
Sure. And that's, and Andrew and Ryan, for you both, my perspective on this, I feel like some of the best times in American problem solving from a legislative point of view have come when you had the two parties and all the ideological factions that exist within each of the parties, and everybody's literally, you can see it as butting heads or fighting, but you can also see it as a war of ideas and refining each other and challenging each other, and that's what I love about this and about Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends in general. Is it's a challenge to, the left this has been their issue. Every time we hear about climate change and climate change solutions, we're hearing about, proposals that are coming from the center left, the far left. And so this is a direct challenge to that, saying, okay, we want to solve this too. Here's a different idea. And through that, I think we're going to end up with far better solutions in the end. So that gets me excited about this. And listeners, I hope you're excited about it as well. We have a bit more time with our guests. We've got a quick break here, but stick around. Andrew Sandstrom, Regional Director of Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends, here with us. And Ryan Smith, former president of USU College Republicans. And Ryan, I apologize, I forgot you told me about the promotion. Now chair of the College Republican organization here throughout the state of Utah. And Ryan and Andrew will be with us for a bit more. If you have a question or a comment about all of this, 753-5868. If you want to see more of the Prove It Act itself, I've linked to both the Washington Examiner op-ed from Grayson Massey and some information about the act itself in Legalese. If you want to read that on our Facebook page, we'll be right back. Jumping right back in here to maximize our time with our two guests here. Andrew Sandstrom, Regional Director of Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends. You can connect with them, by the way, I hadn't mentioned this yet, via their website, which is yccdaction.org. Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends, yccdaction.org. They have a great newsletter if you're interested in this type of thing, very informative. I would recommend it. Also joining us now, former president of USU College Republicans, now chair of College Republicans for the state of Utah, Ryan Smith. And Ryan, Andrew, thank you for your time both. And I know there's never enough time in these interviews to get to everything I'd like to as far as the particulars and specifics. But for people out there who want to know more, who want to get involved with groups like Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends, or just learning more about a conservative climate change solution and proposals that exist out there, where would you point people, young and old?
So I think I appreciate you having us on, first of all. Second of all, the yccdaction.org site that you mentioned is a great resource. I would also recommend, there's a website that is carbonadvantage.us. That's carbonadvantage.us, and that's just a great place to go if you want to see why foreign polluter fee or why the Prove It Act would be a good idea. It shows you just how much cleaner industries in the U.S. are. I would highly recommend that website. Again, that's carbonadvantage.us.
Carbonadvantage.us. All right, I'm linking to all these on our Facebook page if you're driving right now and don't have a chance to write these down. And again, the Prove It Act is introduced. Will be up for debate, so you're going to be hearing more about this eventually. Congress moves slowly, of course, but just a really unique idea, collecting data to better understand global emissions, looking at incentives that would both beef up manufacturing and improve the cleanliness of manufacturing here in the U.S., while at the same time subtly penalizing overseas manufacturers importing into the U.S. that are heavy polluters. This is a real, very serious proposal, and it's coming from conservatives, and it's honestly, we need more of this kind of thing. And Andrew and Ryan, if you can, in the few minutes we have left here, Andrew, maybe start with you. What got you excited about this, about getting involved and getting conservative proposals more in the spotlight?
So I've been a Republican since I was 8 years old, and we had a mock election, and I voted for Bush over Gore in the 2000 election. So obviously, I've cared about conservatism for a very long time, and I was a Boy Scout, right? I annoy my family members by being the guy who picks up litter when we're walking around Disneyland, right? I have always wanted there to be a leadership on this issue, but what for conservative youth, what we see coming from Democrats is just stuff we can't swallow, because it purports to be good for the environment, but it ends up also jeopardizing a lot of our liberties, jeopardizing our economy. And so having not just saying no to bad ideas, but saying yes to good ideas is something that I've always been about when it comes to environment and it comes to Republican policy. And so Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends has just been a great movement to be a part of for that reason, because we're trying to give those answers to young people. And I've noticed, Jason, that when I show up on college campuses, the response isn't, what's your policy? What's it about? I mean, it's that, but it's also, hey, we've been waiting for you. We want to talk about climate. We want to do events about climate. And so I'm really excited to see, we've got the Prove It Act, and I'm excited to see what else is going to happen in the future. And I think it's going to make a big difference for the party with this generation.
Very cool stuff. And Andrew, your words remind me, I think of my father, actually. My dad is a lifelong conservative, and he is older. He's at an advanced age, and he is one of the most avid, aggressive recyclers I have ever met, because he hates waste. And that surprises a lot of people, I think, when they learn that about him. But it speaks to this, that these are things that conservative Republicans care about, and it's easy to mistake that for otherwise because of the narrative we see. And Ryan, I know you and I have talked about this before too. What led you to, beefing up young Republican presence on college campuses? From your own experience, there is a hunger out there, as Andrew mentioned. For you guys, what comes next?
I mean, for me, what I'd love to see, and I just want to mention this first, but I really do see this interest on college campuses, kind of that hunger, like you said, with. And that's what I think we'll continue to see next is more conservatives being interested, other policies that have to do with the environment that are, this is a great policy. Hopefully we have this act get passed, and then we have some other things related, and we're able to, penalize countries like China that are taking advantage of really American industry. As a business, as someone who loves business, wants to go into business, you have to deal with a lot of regulatory things to try to reduce pollution. And then China doesn't even have to deal with that.
Sure.
Those same issues, and they're able to undercut American prices.
Undersell us, while at the same time dumping more into the air. Man. Both of you, this has been so fascinating. Let's check in with you again soon. Please promise to come back. And for our listeners, again, Regional Director of Young Conservatives for Carbon Dividends, Andrew Sandstrom, and Chair of College Republicans here in Utah, Ryan Smith, our guests. Thanks to Andrew and Ryan and our listeners. Please stay tuned. Hour 2 right after this here on KVNU Logan.